Hi Year 12. So we're looking now at our next lesson on forensic psychology. So we're still looking at psychological explanations for offending behaviour. So this is forensic psychology lesson number 12, and this time we're going to be looking at psychological explanations, in particular focusing on the psychodynamic approach. So if we just take a look and try and put this into context as to where we actually are, what we've looked at is offending behaviour. Okay, we've looked at our definitions, what it is. Remember, that's not on your specification, that's just so that we're all starting with the same definitions. The next area of your specification is offender profiling, so top down and bottom up. And then we move on to look at number 3 and 4 on the screen, which is your explanations for offending behaviour. So there's two broad types of explanations. There's your biological explanations and your psychological explanations. So your biological explanations, there's two of them, the historical approach, and then you've got your genetics and neural explanations. Now please treat genetics and neural explanations as separate there, although they are the more contemporary explanations from the biological approach. You've also got psychological explanations for offending behaviour. So you start off with Eysenck's theory of criminal personality, which obviously has a biological element to it. You then look at your cognitive explanations. You look at level of moral reasoning and cognitive distortions, including hostile attribution bias and minimalisation. So important to know the difference between those two biases. Differential association theory, which you should have just done if you've looked at the lesson previous to this one. We've got a double lesson today, and then what we're going to look at is the psychodynamic explanations in this lesson. So if we've stuck to our timetable, okay, it's Friday and you should have had lesson 3, which would have been differential association, and this is lesson 4, which will be the psychodynamic approach. So in our last lesson on differential association, I didn't talk you through that one, I left you to get on with it, but this was a slide towards the end. And it's a very typical essay question, so I just want to make sure that we're happy with this. So discuss the differential association theory of offending. Refer to at least one other explanation of offending in your answer. Now you should have had a plan to this, and it is a very typical exam question. Now the structure is exactly the same, okay, as what you usually do, but this time your evaluation is going to really be looking at the other approach. So we kick off with the AO1, differential association theory. We're going to discuss what is differential association theory of offending. Okay, so the AO1 comes first. Then we're going to have evaluation. Okay, so perhaps a positive or a negative of differential association. Now, perhaps I think the best thing to do would be differential association theory is it can explain offending behaviour by. Then I would have support for this as an explanation for offending behaviour, so something that is a positive criticism. And then I would go on to my second burger, however, a weakness of the differential association theory is. And when I do that, I would then lead into my alternative explanation. So for example, differential association theory, a weakness of differential association theory is it is a reductionist explanation. Okay, it only focuses on that social level. It looks at socialization, therefore ignoring that other factors may be important in explaining offending behaviour. For example, and then you just pick another explanation. Now the most obvious one would be biological explanations. Obviously the differential association theory completely ignores that there may be a biological explanation for why people offend. And then perhaps I would talk about genetics or neural explanations, and then again I would AO1 that, and then end with a kind of more evaluation by saying that although the biological approach is useful, perhaps if you actually combined it, had a more holistic approach looking at differential association, the environment and biology, then it would be a more successful explanation of offending. So just think about that essay, think about what I've said, make sure you do have a plan for that, okay? I know we're not doing many essays at the moment, but please remember when we do come back in year 13, we are going to kick off with forensics. We're going to go through all of this, or rather you're going to go through all of this, and we're going to have an end of unit test, and we're going to literally bombard you with essays. So please make sure you do get this. Okay, so today's lesson is going to focus on the psychodynamic explanations. Okay, so just try and think, what can we remember about the psychodynamic approach? Okay, now hopefully you're thinking Sigmund Freud, it's really weird. He also always talks about psychosexual stages. He's the theory that we all think is really odd. Okay, I love Freud, I think he's really funny. Okay, but we've got to use this to talk about how it's going to link to offending behaviour. So the key elements here, the key element of the psychodynamic approach is that early experiences are coupled with innate drives, and these create adult personality, including the deviant roles that some people choose to take. So within the psychodynamic approach, you have to look at the role of the superego in moral behaviour, maternal deprivation theory, which was covered in year 1 under John Bowlby. Okay, so think back to attachments, also plays a part in offending behaviour. So Bowlby did the juvenile young thieves. Now remember that John Bowlby was a Freudian psychiatrist, and his early theory of maternal deprivation was based on the psychodynamic principles. So whenever we're talking about psychodynamic explanations, there's 2 that we need to refer to: the role of the superego and maternal deprivation theory. So please do refer back to attachments. Okay, so first of all, the first explanation is, let's look at maternal deprivation theory from Bowlby. What he basically said is prolonged separation between a mother and a child would have long-term emotional consequences if this happens before the age of 2.5 and if there is no mother substitute person available. Bowlby also felt there was a continuing risk up until about the age of 5. So one possible consequence was affectionless psychopathy, which is a lack of normal affection, shame, or sense of responsibility, and it's related to the general notion of what we know as a psychopath. So the 44 juvenile thieves study was used in support of his theory. If we can remember, quick summary, he compared 44 thieves attending his clinic with 44 control patients. None of the control patients experienced early separations, whereas 39% of the thieves had. He also found those thieves with an affectionless character had almost all experienced frequent separations, 86% of the affectionless thieves compared with 17% of the other thieves. So quite strong evidence there for this maternal deprivation theory. And therefore, if we don't have a mother figure, it's going to lead to some kind of offending behaviour. Okay, so the second psychodynamic explanation is the role of this personality. In particular, we need to focus on the superego. Okay, but just think, according to Freud, there are 3 parts of the personality triad. Okay, so just think about them. What were they? What do each of those parts do? Okay, so personality triad, the id, the superego, and the ego. A reminder, the id represents our primitive wants. It operates according to the pleasure principle. The superego determines which behaviours are permissible, causing feelings of guilt when rules are broken. It's known as our moral compass. And the ego mediates between the impulsive demands of the id and the moralistic demands of the superego. It's also known as the reality principle. Now, in terms of offending behaviour, it's the superego that we're concerned about, because it's the superego that's likely to be concerned with offending behaviour, because that is the bit of you that is concerned with what's right and what is wrong. So the superego. It's our morality principle. Therefore, it makes sense that it's the part of the personality that is linked with offending behaviour. Now, there's 3 ways that this can happen. Okay, it could be because we have a weak or underdeveloped superego, a harsh or overdeveloped superego, or a deviant superego. Okay, now attached to this email is page 272 of the Flanagan book, so you can read through this for a bit more information. But in theory, this is what it's about. If we have a weak superego, According to Freud, this was caused by an absent same-sex parent in the phallic stage. It leads to a satisfaction of the id, and that's not going to be good. It's all about immediate gratification there. If we have a strong or an overactive superego, either causing the person to become anxious and guilty by nature, causing them to unconsciously seek punishment, and therefore they do so by committing criminal acts, or by preventing the release of anxiety through defence mechanisms, causing an overabundance of unresolved conflicts to occur, overwhelming the ego, and being expressed in extreme criminal activity. Or a deviant superego, which is caused by the internalisation of an immoral superego from deviant parents. So, in other words, it's our superego that is perhaps affected that leads to deviant behaviour, whether it's underdeveloped, whether it's overdeveloped, or whether we've just learnt to have a deviant superego. It's that right and wrong that we all learn that leads us to committing crime. So there we have the AO1 of the psychodynamic approach. There's 2 parts to it. Make sure you know it. So obviously we have to evaluate it. Okay, so here are our 5 evaluation points. I've summarised them for you here. All right, so again, we've got to make sure that we can evaluate Bowlby, because if it's a small mark question, it may be specifically on Bowlby. So we know what Bowlby's theory was all about. Evaluation point, his theory has important implications in the care of young children. So this was really what you did in attachments here. We've also got some more general points which you can read through, but one of the good ones here is a nice idam one here, so a nice gravy grenade burger. Freud's theory is gender bias. He proposes that women develop a weaker superego than men. Okay, now obviously it's a massive example of alpha bias here, so please make sure you're using your terms. But have a read through these 5 burgers, make sure you understand them. Okay, now again, I've attached page 273 here to this email, so again, just read through them. It's basically what's on the screen, but in a different way, you know, so make sure that you understand them, write them out so that you understand your evaluation points, add in extra layers if you wish to, join some together to make some triple burgers, work at your level. And so that's the AO1 and the AO3. So AO2, okay, make sure that we're happy with this. So Jayesh has recently been convicted of rape. He blames this on a difficult childhood where his mother died when he was still a baby. He was then passed around various members of the family but never settled anywhere. Jayesh's father never recovered from his wife's death, emotionally speaking, and has not been there for his son. So using your knowledge of the psychodynamic explanations of crime, explain Jayesh's offending behaviour. Okay, so have a go at that question. Now obviously here, okay, if you look, we've got to make sure we explicitly link it to this case study, to this SEM. And what we've got here is his mother's died when he was still a baby. So there's that maternal deprivation that we've got here, okay, that, as we know, according to Bowlby, could lead into psychopathy and offending behaviour, hence obviously the offending behaviour here because he's been convicted of a rape. It's got here that he was passed around from various members of the family. He's never settled anywhere, so obviously he's, you know, never really had that socialisation, he's never really had that connection. Okay, his dad says that he's not been there for his son. Okay, so if we go back and we have a look at the superego here, okay, perhaps his superego caused by an absence of the same-sex parent in the phallic stage leads to a satisfaction of the id, so perhaps he has a weak superego because his dad was never there for him, and therefore his id is the primary focus for him, immediate gratification, which leads to offending behaviour. Okay, so there's lots of different explanations. Make sure that you can answer that question, jot down some answers. And the second question here, discuss one limitation of psychodynamic explanations of offending behaviour. Okay, so again, you can pick something from here, put it in your own words, but remember that structure, please. Point, evidence, link. So what? Why is this a problem? Okay. And there we have our psychodynamic explanation. So we're pretty much done now. So if we literally go back to the specification, you can see you've now looked at all of your explanations for offending behaviour. There's a lot there. Okay, so please do just make sure you've got your notes in order. Take the time and just think, yep, okay, I know all of this. I'm aware of what they are. Remember that an exam question could ask you to discuss 2 or more psychological explanations. It could ask you, as I started off saying, to look at one theory and then refer to another in your essay as well. So just take the time. You've got your biological explanations, and in theory there's 3, although genetics and neural come under 1, they are separate. And then you've got all your different psychological explanations as well. Okay folks, any questions as per usual, please ask me, and hopefully we'll get to see each other soon.